Patel. I am Research Director at South Asia Watch on Trade, Economics and Environment. A warm welcome to you all to this sixth edition of the webinar series on COVID and South Asia. We have been holding this series of webinars for the last several weeks on different aspects of the impact of COVID on socioeconomic sectors. And as COVID cases are escalating, all sectors are impacted, but surely tourism sector is one of the worst hit sectors. And in this context, as uncertainty abounds, we are focusing on tourism.
This is better than the other one, eh?
Yes. And the questions that we would like to focus on in this session are, what are the strategies that governments and private sector can take to restore tourism to at least pre-COVID levels? Or if that's unrealistic immediately, then at least what actions can be taken to inject a kind of a modicum of hope and sanity into a sector that has been heavily battered by the pandemic. We have before us a list of eminent speakers, and they will be moderated by Professor Rupa Chanda, and I'll introduce her. She is a professor of economics at Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore since 1997. Prior to joining IIMB, she was an economist at the International Monetary Fund in Washington, DC. She also briefly served as the head UNESCAP Sub-Regional Office for South and Southwest Asia in New Delhi while on leave from IIMB. And let me also add that what is not written in her brief bio posted on the university website is that she's an authority on services trade in the context of South Asia. Any international trade economist and international trade policy maker who wants to write or study services trade will have to bump into the numerous and substantive papers and works she has done on the subject. Without further ado, I will hand it over to Professor Chanda.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much, Dr. Karel, for this wonderful introduction. Welcome to all the participants, as of course our keynote speaker and the panelists. So I first of all thank SOTI for giving me this opportunity to participate in and moderate this session. I think we are facing really an unprecedented crisis. We know that the human, economic, and social toll has been immense. And uncertainty is, I think, the most difficult thing about this crisis, because we don't know how things are going to unfold, when a cure will be available. And this has made policymaking even more difficult than in other crises, where at least one could see the end of the road. Here, one is really not clear. And the toll in particular sectors such as aviation, logistics, manufacturing, and among them tourism and hospitality has been really immense. In particular, tourism, which relies on people-to-people contact and travel, has been very badly affected. So if we look at the significance of this sector globally as well as for South Asia, the World Travel and Tourism Council said in its report that tourism accounted for 10.3% of global GDP and 330 million jobs in 2019. And of course, the rising disposable incomes, lowering of transport costs, ease of travel, use of ICT, relaxation of visas, and so on have helped the growth of the sector. And in South Asia, as per their estimates, tourism accounted for $234 billion in economic activity, around 6.6% of the region's GDP in 2019. And of course, we know for some countries like Nepal and Maldives, tourism is a significant contributor to their GDP. With the near complete halt on travel and due to social distancing, the sector has really come to a grinding halt. The World Economic Forum estimates that due to COVID-19, some 120 million jobs may be at risk, with economic damage likely to exceed $1 trillion in 2020 alone. Now, this sector has very strong backward and forward linkages. It is highly employment intensive, and it supports an entire value chain of activities. So the slowdown in this sector has a lot of developmental and poverty-related implications. For instance, if I just take the case of Nepal, a whole range of actors like tour operators, trekking agencies, Sherpas, mountain guides, restaurants, SMEs have been affected. So if you just think along the entire chain of operators who are active in this sector, the direct and the indirect effects of a slowdown in tourism are really immense. So the issue before us in this panel, this webinar, will be to see how we can revive this sector and what kinds of strategies could be used to mitigate the effects. As you know, this UN Secretary General has also gone on record and emphasized the importance of rebuilding this sector so that it regains its position as a provider of decent jobs, stable incomes, and a boost to economies. So clearly, both the private and public sectors will have to play a role in this revival process. Things like provision of information on safety and hygiene protocols, framing of clear reopening strategies, certification of safe establishments. These are some of the things that come immediately to mind to help the sector. There could be a role for regional and bilateral cooperation through bilateral bubbles, travel bubbles, corridors between countries on a reciprocal basis, testing of safety frameworks, and numerous other ways. So this is also a time to look for more longer term sort of strategies, more resilient strategies like developing niche segments, high value, low volume tourism, and better infrastructure, which would actually help restart some of these economies and help the sector in the long run. So without further ado, I mean, what we have before us is a tall task, but I think we have really an eminent set of speakers here who will deliberate on this matter, who will talk about the impact of this crisis, as well as some of the ways forward that the economies in this region can take. Prior to the panel, we have a keynote speech by Ms. Yankila Sherpa, the former Minister of Tourism, Government of Nepal, and Advisor Tourism Recovery Task Force of Nepal. Just to briefly introduce our keynote speaker, Ms. Sherpa is Vice President of Trans-Himalayas Women for Environment and Livelihood. She's founder and past president of Federation of Women Entrepreneurs of Nepal. She served as a member of Parliament of Nepal from 2001 till 2006. She then served her country in the capacity of Assistant Minister and State Minister for Culture, Tourism, and Civil Aviation. As a tourism professional, she has led the male-dominated trekking industry of Nepal by becoming the president of Trekking Agents Association of Nepal. She also served as the chief of the advisory committee of the Nepal Mountaineering Association. She's advisor of Tourism Recovery Task Force, Nepal. So, Madam, you have about 10 to 12 minutes. We really look forward to your keynote speech. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pushpa. Thank you, Soti, for having me as a keynote speaker here. I hope I will do justice to the eminent people attending this webinar. You've said most of the figures about the contribution of tourism to the GDP worldwide and in South Asia also. I'll just mention that in Nepal, the contribution of tourism in 2019 was 6.7%. Just an example of how, Nepal as one of the prominent destinations of tourism in South Asia, 1.1 million or 1 out of every 10 employed people, 1 out of 10 direct employment opportunities were given by tourism. And in Maldives, a third of the national revenue came from tourism. So the most severe impact of COVID-19 was on the economy and livelihoods dependent on tourism. And travel and tourism around the world has been gravely affected by the spread of the coronavirus, as many countries introduced travel restrictions in an attempt to obtain its spread. And the UN World Tourism Organization estimated that global international tourist arrivals might decrease by 58 to 78% in 2020. So you already mentioned that there could be a nearly 0.9 to 1.2 trillion US dollars loss in the worldwide tourism receipts. So now many tourist attractions around the world, such as museums, amusement parks, sports venues, adventure mountain destinations have all remained closed. And the latest data shows that a 65% drop in international tourist arrivals existed in the first 6 months of 2020. I'm just trying to read out some of the points so that we can save time. Now, as a result of the pandemic, I'm just talking about the impact. As a result of the pandemic, Many countries have imposed quarantines, entry bans, and restrictions for citizens or recent travelers to and from the most affected areas, resulting in a slump in demand among travelers. Airports have been the first to shut down, borders closed, flights severely affected, which brought the flow of tourists in South Asia to a complete standstill during the last 8 months. A possible long-term impact has also been on business travel. Decline in business travel, international conferencing, leading to a rise of their virtual and online equivalents. In addition to all this, a threat of the virus has created a lot of fear and apprehension around international long-haul travel in general, which is likely to continue until the virus actually subsides. Now, I will not talk about how much the tourism's effect, the contribution of tourism in Nepal and the other South Asian countries, but it is good to, I think it is worth mentioning here that some South Asian countries have been in partial lockdown since the early onset of the virus. Countries like India, Nepal, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka went into long periods of complete national lockdowns, where even the movement of vehicles was prohibited. And this eliminated any possibility of even domestic travel and tourism, impacting all the overall economies. Whereas businesses and institutions like banks, schools, hospitals, and colleges have managed to function or work remotely, but businesses within the tourism cannot function in this way. The COVID pandemic, coupled with the nationwide lockdowns, airlines and all land transportations, hotels, restaurants, attractions, travel agencies, tour operators, online travel, etc., all have been impacted. Small and medium enterprises, SMEs and micro firms, which include a large informal tourism sector, make up around 80% of the tourism sector, and these may not survive this crisis without a substantial report. So in Nepal, around 30,000 labor force working as porters and climbers in the mountain expeditions have been unemployed due to the pandemic. As per World Bank's report, 20,000 trekking and travel agencies, guides have been jobless, and around 2,600 trekking agencies closed since the last 8 months, and uncertainty is going to go for the coming seasons as well. With all this, the whole of South Asia region is likely to have to face a long-term dire consequences of a prolonged shutdown in tourism. A good recovery of tourism in South Asia is likely to take place. A good recovery of tourism in South Asia is likely to take place 18 months or more. Domestic tourism will recover first, followed by intra-regional tourism between areas designated as COVID-19 safe zones. These could be some kind of strategies. International long-haul travel will likely be the last to recover as per the World Bank. However, because of the often unstable and turbulent governments and economic instability in the South Asian countries, the reopening status will vary. But we presume that every crisis could be limited. Sooner or later, this pandemic will also come under control, or we will have to learn to live with it. Yeah, over here, Ananda. With it. The world has made two mindsets. The world has made two mindsets to handle and overcome COVID-19 crisis. One is staying safe, wait for vaccine or antivirus drug to come and help to save livelihoods and the industry. Another one is gradually opening up of the economic activities, following the health, hygiene, and safety protocols. South Asian region is following the second step. Almost all the countries of our region are now slowly opening up and businesses are starting to resume. At this challenging time, governments of South Asia need to come up with suitable policies and quickly draw out clear-cut strategies for the survival and revival of the industry. South Asia's immense tourism potential, both as a source market and a host destination, has yet to be unleashed. Intra-regional tourism movements are still not interlinked. It is time to come forward together for tourism. For example, in 2019, the outbound number of Indian visitors was approximately 25 million. Bangladeshi visitors approximately 1 million, Sri Lankan 1.2, Nepali outbound was about 500,000. This region sends approximately 30 million outbound visitors, whereas it receives roughly 12 million inbound visitors. So this is the time we need to explore the opportunities about how we can attract new segments of visitors within the region itself. For example, in India, destinations like Nepal has been a perception that Nepal is for pilgrimage, honeymoon, and casino for middle-class visitors. But Nepal's rich adventure, wildlife, and the other niche segment can be a new taste for affluent Indian visitors. Similarly, for Nepali visitors, for example, looking for beach experiences, Sri Lanka and Maldives could be the destination. Very recently, a tourism recovery task force has been launched by the government of Nepal in bringing together industry, veterans, tourism experts, heads of tourism associations, and key institutions and leading global tourism organizations. This joint initiative of both the public and private sector is aimed to synergize the efforts of all tourism stakeholders for the quickest revival and recovery of tourism. And as an advisor of the team, I'm confident that this model can be useful for many other South Asian countries as well. The task force is designing a strategy where 2020 will be focused as a year of survival, 2021 as the year of revival, and 2022 as the year of thrival with specific actions and programs. As the revival of tourism is indispensable for revitalizing the overall economy of the region, it is time to collaborate, not a time to compete, and coming together, helping each other will certainly help South Asian countries to recover faster with new connections and business ventures. I'm not sure how much time I have, but I have some, the revival strategies and steps that has been planned by the Tourism Revival Task Force Group.
You have three more minutes. Okay. 3 more minutes. 3 more minutes.
I can just read the points. Number 1, lobby for survival of small and medium enterprises, SMEs. And number 2, disseminate readily available information. And for domestic tourism promotion, empowering rural destinations, the mountains, the trekking routes, the national parks, and other in Nepal and South Asian countries can be promoted as travel destinations since they are naturally isolated and exotic. Nepal just also launched a campaign of its own called Desh Darshan to promote domestic tourism. Now, the regional collaboration, which I have been talking about, is something that is a new concept that we should come up with. This would be facilitating access, easing border restrictions and visa processes, making it easier to travel within the region between neighboring countries, as well as building travel infrastructures, railways, air travel, and roads more convenient. Sub-regional institutions can facilitate negotiations and implementations of travel arrangements between travel bubbles. And a sub-regional marketing strategy themed at our tour itineraries in more than one country. Ecotourism, religious tourism. For example, we have the Buddhist circuit now between Nepal, India, Sri Lanka, Bhutan, etc. This also allows common goals and standards to be set. Data sharing, shared market data, research and statistics like visitor data or aviation data can also help identify potential markets. Now, the destination upgrade is something that we need to do during this time of when tourism is quiet. using this time to rebuild, restore, and revitalize the tourism infrastructure in our respective countries, cleaning up campaigns, renovations, etc. And then, of course, technology and digitalization is a very important strategy that we have taken. Health screening questions for travelers, temperature checks, and COVID-19 antibody tests. COVID-19 protocols of mask and social distancing for tourists. Contactless tourism. We don't know how profitable that is going to be, contactless tourism. Contactless checking in, mobile apps, enabling touchless ending to tourist destinations, and contactless payments. Well, I was talking about the virtual tourism also people are talking about. I'm not sure how profitable that's going to be. Now, the main important thing is within our destination areas, the preparedness in our destination areas, to be really prepared for a tourism in a new situation, and effective and up-to-date communication with the source market is something that is going to be counted as a very important part of reviving tourism in our regions. Thank you. This is all that I have as a keynote presentation here.
Thank you very much, Ms. Yankila. I think you've laid out a number of short-term, medium-term, as well as a sort of long-term outlook of how to revive the sector and build for the future. Your sentiments regarding regional cooperation and some of the steps that sub-regional institutions could take is, I think, something we can come back to. I'm sure others will also be talking about these aspects. So thank you very much. Now we will move on to our panel discussion. Our first speaker is Mr. Dorji Dhradul, Director General of Tourism Council of Bhutan. Mr. Dorji Dhradul, he works for the Apex government body where he's the director. This is responsible for tourism in Bhutan. He served as Zongda of Gaza district for almost 4 years. Before that, he has worked in various capacities in the fields of agricultural research, policy, and development. He was also the founding director of the Department of Agricultural Marketing and Cooperatives and the founding registrar of cooperatives in Bhutan. He published a number of articles on subjects of contemporary relevance in the national newspaper, including a novel titled Escapades, Awakenings. He received a Master of Science degree in Agricultural Extension from the University of Reading, UK. So, Mr. Dorji, you have about 8 to 10 minutes for your intervention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Rupa, Madam Yankila, and my fellow panelists, and all other participants attending this webinar. A very good evening. So, as far as the revival strategy is concerned, I feel that it has to be a holistic approach. Holistic approach, both in the country, within the country, where we are talking about different sectors here, and also beyond the country. So if you're talking about South Asia, I think more importantly within these regions, I think we need to work very closely together for this to revive from this very serious situation caused by COVID. Now, similarly, like all other countries, Bhutan also has been very seriously hit, both in the economic, social, and also the livelihood. So, I mean, those we are not an exception, I think. So impact-wise is very similar. And I just like to touch upon some ideas on the revival strategy, guided by this principle of working together as a holistic approach. Like tourism, for instance, in Bhutan, we just cannot stand alone. It has to be very much integrated with the mainstream sectors and the development. So some of the ideas that I will be sharing may not be will be not new to you all, but I'm sharing is just because these are some of the things that we are already working on. One thing that will cut across any revival strategy in tourism post-COVID, I mean, in preparation for new normal, would be the importance that we will be attaching to the personal safety and well-being, because COVID has now made us to believe, experience that personal well-being and health is of topmost priority. So therefore, even the future tourists, I think, whenever they choose a destination, they will be looking for the degree or the level of the safety in that destination. So therefore, whatever revival strategies that we are working, I think this will be again guided by this principle of how can we make sure the tourists who are coming visiting our destination will feel safe. Not only feel safe, I mean, they will be also made safe. So I feel that will be the overriding principle, I would say, or a guiding philosophy for this revival strategy. Now, in doing so, what would we mean is, like, for instance, in Bhutan, of course, so far, our tourism services are not very much digitized or digitalized. So now we are already embarking on making all our tourism services digital. So, of course, we have just started, and we are hoping that once we reopen, all our services will be digitalized. I mean, which was also touched upon by Yankila in her keynote address. So that will be one of our biggest strategy. Second would be, I would say, the services. I'm talking in context of Bhutan. Like, we know that Bhutan, the services, tourism services, pre-COVID, is not up to the standard. I mean, just to confess honestly, while of course we didn't have a major criticism or feedbacks or complaints from the tourists, but then from our own assessment, we like to confess and believe that we can improve our services provided to the tourists in many folds. So therefore, we feel that similarly, maybe in other countries also, I think, because tourists, I think we have to try to give them the best of the best services. So that is another one area that we have already started to work on. So therefore, we are talking about reskilling, upskilling, and retraining, basically also improving the infrastructure, the various tourism products, and also we are in fact all now taking this opportunity to improve so that we can give a guaranteed quality services to our tourists. So that would be the second one. Third, I would say, would be identification of some unique tourism product. Now, pre-COVID, of course, for instance, I'm just giving an example of Bhutan. Pre-COVID, Bhutan was really known for nature and culture. Tourists would come to Bhutan mainly to see our culture, our nature. So we have not really embarked on other areas. So therefore, we are thinking of diversifying the product one, and more importantly, trying to identify some new products. So one particular product that we are already embarking on is wellness and well-being, because now, because of COVID, now, as I said earlier, health and well-being is going to be very important. So therefore, Bhutan has this potential to develop ourselves as a tourist destination for wellness and well-being. So then the fourth one would be the domestic tourism. Now, I don't know when the tourism is going to come back to its normal. So until such time, I think we would very much depend on the domestic tourism. And for Bhutan, domestic tourism was never in the limelight. I mean, it was always in the in shadow. So therefore, now we have already started to develop and promote domestic tourism, and that would be also something that will keep our economy in the tourism sector alive in the absence of the inbound tourists. Now, coming specifically to some ideas at the South Asia level, would be, I think, some already touched by Yankila. One, I was also going to propose that maybe we should think of having a formal engagement within these South Asian countries, maybe taking advantage of the existing structures like SAC, or maybe we can even think of creating a new forum or a body for South Asia tourism. So this body could, discuss and dwell on the matters like the common standards protocols, facilitating transit, entry, exit of tourists, development of regional circuit tourism packages, improving air connectivity, sharing of information, best practices. So this body can be really instrumental in taking the South Asian tourism to the next level. As earlier, as Amyanki has said, I was also quite surprised. I mean, our outbound tourism is far more than the inbound tourism that we are getting, 30 million versus 12 million. So there's a huge opportunity for us to increase this inbound tourism at the South Asian level. So then the second proposal idea that I would have is, which I don't know, maybe you all agree or disagree, but what I feel is, even pre-COVID, South Asia region was not really considered a safe place to travel by a tourist. So this is one kind of undesirable reputation that we have as a region. So maybe we really need to work a lot on this. I mean, how can we improve our reputation as a safe place to travel? So, and if we can do something on this, then really our inbound tourism or tourist arrival in this region can be really increased, I would say. So this is something that I also want to say. And then the third one would be at the South Asia level. As Amyankil was said, maybe we really can take advantage of having to develop some common tourism product. Like, for instance, we could use the common resources like the Great Himalayas range and the unique and the diverse culture, the history, the spiritualism, that heritage that we have. So these are some things that I would say. And now, finally, I just wanted to share a little bit about Bhutan tourism, because we always feel that, well, most actually tourists who have come to Bhutan, they always say Bhutan is a unique. I'm sure they must be telling the same thing to other countries also. But I just wanted to share that Bhutan, because of this COVID, for some valid reason, I tend to believe that we really don't have to do much changes in the policy as such, because some countries are already saying now maybe they need to change the tourism policy. For instance, they want to get away from this mass tourism. For instance, Thailand has been saying this. Some other countries have been saying this. Whereas in Bhutan, for last 50 years, from the day one when we started tourism, we adopted under the leadership guidance of our fourth king, His Majesty, the fourth king, we adopted and started to implement a tourism policy called high value, low volume. So for last 50 years, we have been doing this. Now, this high value, low volume is becoming very relevant with this this COVID and the post-COVID, because this high value, low volume, if I just explain a little bit, basically here we are talking about a guided tour here. And we are also talking about the regulating the number of tourists based on our carrying capacity. So it's not a mass tourism. So therefore, the new normal, we are talking about not a mass tourism, we are talking about a guided tourism, we are talking about safety. So therefore, I feel that for Bhutan, unfortunately, policy-wise, we may not have to do much changes. It is already there. This is only thing is that maybe we can further strengthen our policy of high value, low volume. So this is something that I wanted to share with all, and maybe I will stop here for now. So thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dradu. Again, quite a variety of rich ideas that you've discussed, both from the national perspective as well as the regional perspective. A lot of it in common, actually, with what our keynote speaker also observed regarding the regional cooperation strategies. So thank you very much. Our next speaker is Mr. Thoyib Mohammed. He is currently the Managing Director of Maldives Marketing and PR Corporation. He has been in this position since November 2018 with the new government administration. A Bournemouth University graduate with Master of Arts in Broadcast and Film Management, Mr. Thoyib started his career in the media industry at Television Maldives. With over 14 years of experience in the area of management, he brings with him extensive experience in strategic planning, decision-making, and international networking, with emphasis on fostering creativity at the executive management level. So, Mr. Thoyib, Mr. Mohammed, the floor is yours. Please, you have 10 to 12 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Rupa. The COVID-19 pandemic has unprecedented in its scale and at least in recent history. The disruption it has caused to all aspects of our lives is incomparable. No industry was hit as hard as the global travel industry, which came to an absolute standstill, as our speakers just said. For the industry as a whole, and for us, Maldives as a destination, this is a scenario for which none of us has planned for. For the Maldives, 2019 was a record year in terms of the number of arrivals, and 2020 started very well, with a 14% increase in arrivals in January compared to the same month last year. The crisis started affecting the industry in February with an 11% drop in arrivals compared to 2019. In March, it was down by 63%. As you know, the worst hit countries at the early stages of the pandemic happen to be some of our most important source markets, such as China, Italy, and the UK. And within a short period of time, it has spread to the rest of Europe and Asia and to the United States. We registered the first case of COVID-19 in early March, and by April, we had a lockdown. Although it was a disastrous situation for the tourism industry, we worked with a very positive attitude from the very beginning. Of course, none of us were certain of where we were heading, but we gained hope from past experiences with crisis, although they totally were different in nature and scale compared to what we faced. A global pandemic is something we have never encountered. Several months after going into the lockdown and with our borders open, even today, we are working with that positive attitude. We have learned over the last 2 decades that our industry is highly resilient. While events of September 11, 2001 and its aftermath affected tourism globally, the Indian Ocean tsunami of 2004 affected the countries in Asia. What we learned from those events is that the industry has the potential to bounce back. So when the crisis hit us, we work to be fully prepared by the time markets are ready to travel once again. During April and May, when the world was in virtual lockdown, the question of when travel could begin was in all of our minds. However, we started getting a sense of how this would evolve. Many questions remain answered. After the first wave has passed, how will governments avoid subsequent outbreaks? How successful will public health authorities be in controlling sporadic explosions of infections? While the questions of when business will resume was important to all of us, we Visit Maldives prioritize on maintaining our brand and sustain the position we have gained earlier. As you would know, the marketing campaigns we have launched and planned for the year were totally disrupted. However, the continuation of our marketing campaigns was among our top priorities. We adapted and re-strategized our campaigns. We shifted our campaigns to online platforms. We focused on empathy. We too began our Visit Later campaign like many other countries in the world. Our objectives was to keep Maldives in people's minds and offered content on various social media platforms for people to see and dream about the Maldives. We worked together with the industry. Resorts and guest houses also adapted to the Visit Later campaign. Just a few weeks after we went into lockdown, we were operating almost fully online, with our Visit Maldives staffs also working from home. Difficult. A very important part of our efforts during the period after lockdown was to ensure we kept in touch with our marketing partners and stakeholders around the world. We made sure that we kept them updated on the situation in Maldives. At the same time, we kept a close watch on the situation in those countries, constantly measuring the willingness to travel in those markets when the borders open up. We made sure we took all the opportunities available to us to take part in online discussions and forums with international regional tourism organizations to get an understanding of how things were evolving in the international tourism sector. And we were regularly in touch with the industry stakeholders through online meetings, getting their views and ideas as well. At the same time, we began strategizing and planning how we were going to relaunch our marketing efforts once borders open up, and began to get ready to roll out our marketing when the time comes. We knew countries were likely to open their borders for inbound and outbound travel on the level of control they achieved in curbing the spread of the disease. We knew source market governments will also look at the controls in place before they will allow their citizens to travel and back from various destinations. During our planning, we factored in that details such as measures taken at public touchpoints such as airports and social distancing in domestic air, sea and land transfer will become important factors. And also that hotels and resorts have to communicate the steps they have taken to ensure the safety of their guests. Maldives is lucky to have been endowed with our unique natural geography. We plan to capitalize on our key USP of one island, one resort that would help offer a contained, safe environment for holidaymakers. These unique characteristics offers us the opportunity to promote the Maldives as a relatively safe destination compared to many other destinations. We had faith that we can successfully adapt our marketing to suit the situation. Due to the country's geography, the country's health authorities also have been able to a large extent to keep infection rates extremely low in islands other than Male, the capital. Although few cases emerge in various islands from time to time, the disease is very much contained in Male, the capital, where the government, through various measures, have been able to control it to fairly safe levels, and we were able to ease lockdown in Male as early as mid-May. To sustain business and to offer relief to individuals affected by the crisis, a COVID-19 relief fund was established by the government earlier as soon as the COVID struck. Relief loans were offered to various categories of business that included a separate loan scheme for resorts and a separate scheme for small businesses and the self-employed. Relief loans for resorts and businesses were meant to ensure that they were able to meet their monthly operational costs that includes salaries for their employees. That was very important. Financial relief is also being offered to people who have been laid off or whose salaries were reduced due to business closures. In addition to this, a 6-month moratorium was granted for repayment of loans to commercial banks. The government also offered resorts the option to defer their land rent payments due to the government during this time. This has helped businesses to the industry to sustain their operations during the worst period of the crisis. During May and June, we were also developing our health and safety plans. Separate guidelines were made for resorts, hotels, guest houses, and liveaboards to ensure the safety of visitors and staff that work in them. On 15th July, the Maldives opened its borders to international visitors, 110 days after closing the borders as a precautionary measure against the spread of COVID-19. The government made this bold decision to reopen the borders, fully confident in the measures and preparations put in place to ensure the safety of all our visitors and the people who work in the tourism sector, including those in the resorts. The opening of our borders for tourism was a courageous decision made by the president. To be the first to do so demonstrates a high level of confidence to the global travel market. We were the first to give an opportunity to cater to the pent-up need to escape from the stress of being under lockdown for people around the world. With that, we launched a new campaign with the slogan, Rediscover Maldives, as you can see from my back, invited people around the world to relieve the happiness and to rejoice in the sun. The campaign was launched on social media platforms. Online campaigns were held to promote the theme. At the early stages of planning, we also look at the potential in the neighboring markets, as people would have felt safer to travel short distances at times of crisis. As one, I think it was the one from Bhutan, Dorji just mentioned. And India, for example, was the second largest source market for us last year. Thailand, Singapore, Malaysia, and Taiwan are also among the top source markets in the region. From what we achieve in terms of the arrivals, we have not been able to reach our target so far, mainly because of the circumstances in the source markets. Major source markets are still under various levels of restrictions on travel, and most of all airlines have just only begun operating to Maldives gradually. But we see all major airlines flying now. Looking at the major markets, China is still not open for travel. Am I running out of time?
You have 1 more minute.
Okay. However, we are seeing an airline operations increasing. Flights from Russia which began last month, has already shown some results. Russia was the top source market for arrivals last month even. Now, with British Airways starting operations, we are confident that we will see arrivals from UK increase. Emirates has increased its frequency. The Gulf market is also doing well. And our current marketing objective is to communicate to the world that Maldives is a safe haven for visitors due to the measures that are in place and the safety offered by the unique geography of the Maldives and the one island, one resort concept. Definitely, we are naturally self-isolated and socially distanced. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mohammed. So I think all the speakers are really looking at the importance of personal safety and well-being and how to capitalize on this. What I found interesting in your intervention was the significance of adaptability, that you have to adapt to the changing circumstances and use whatever advantages you have, leverage them. So whether it's the geographic, the topology of your country, use that to your strategic advantage. So that was quite interesting. And the whole aspect of sort of forward-looking, the planning and using this, keeping the country on everyone's minds, not letting it get buried. So continue with the campaign and keep optimistic. Thank you very much. So our last panelist is Mr. Srilal Mithapala. He is the past president of the Tourist Hotels Association of Sri Lanka. Mr. Mithapala has over 25 years experience in the hospitality industry. He has held several senior positions for over 2 decades in renowned hotel management corporations in Sri Lanka, including the Confifi Group and Serendip Leisure Companies. In 2009, he was appointed the president of the Tourist Hotels Association of Sri Lanka, 2008 to 10 for that period. Now he's retired and engages in various consulting assignments in sustainable tourism development, environment, and wildlife. So, Mr. Mithapala, the floor is yours. We look forward to hearing you.
Thank you, madam. Thank you, everyone, for having me on this panel. I will try to talk a little bit about Sri Lanka in the last few years, what we have done now, and what we are hoping to do. So as you know, Sri Lanka, we had a long protracted war, which disrupted our tourism for many years. But the moment the war was over, we had a dramatic increase. We went from about 400,000 arrivals to 2.2 million in about 10 years. And we were literally flying high, many accolades, and we were trying to reach very ambitious targets when last year, 2019, as you know, we had a very severe terrorist attack, which targeted some of the hotels themselves and which devastated tourism. So that is why I'm trying to show you that Sri Lanka is really suffering from a double whammy. We had huge problems. Tourism dropped to very low levels. But again, because of the resilience, as my good friend in Maldives mentioned, we have been resilient. We moved very fast. It was controllable. It was within our control. And by the end of 2019, we had recovered to 1.9 arrivals from 2.2 before. So we lost only 300,000. So we were very positive and working towards 2020, like Maldives, we were looking for a very successful year. But of course, the COVID hit us. And since May, we have been in lockdown, complete lockdown. So right now we have 0 foreign tourists for the last 6 months. We have dropped down to 70% year on year so far. So everything has come to a standstill. And as most of the speakers mentioned, we have faced a lot of crisis in Sri Lanka. Sometimes I feel we are crisis junkies, but however, this crisis is something we have never faced before. It does not involve only the destination, it involves the whole supply chain. So because of the complex touch points of the chain, it is very difficult to see how a full recovery will take place. As the keynote speaker said, it might take about 18 to 20 months. However, let's see, since then, when the country, we managed to control the virus quite well. We had very zero community transmission. However, as Professor said, we did have a little bit of an upheaval in the last 2 days. So we have to see how this is going to pan out. But however, we opened up tourism for Sri Lankans, locals, and that was fairly successful because, as you know, Sri Lanka, a lot of people travel. So we found that the Sri Lankan market was thriving. People were having full occupancy in most of the hotels, good hotels, over the weekend. So unfortunate, it was a very short based thing. Only on Saturdays, Sundays, and say Friday, Saturday, Sundays we have the high occupancy. But however, whatever it may be, that was a saving grace. And as everyone knows, in this situation, it's all about cash flow. So this was helping Sri Lankan hotels to bring in some cash. And just like Maldives, the government reached out and gave us a range of facilities, moratoriums on loans, rebates on electricity payments and things like that. They even talked about a salary support, but however, that has run into a few bureaucratic problems. So it has not really been unfolded that as yet. But however, still, the hotels are managing to keep their heads above ground. The SME sector, as everyone agreed and said, is feeling it a bit more. So the local market has really helped us, but unfortunately, in this scenario, although we advised our colleagues do not discount too much, there has been some discounting, but some of the other bigger companies who value this type of, who understands the marketing, have added value to their product and not discounted so much. So that therefore there's interest in, you book the hotel, you get an additional free excursion to a wildlife park, you have a lecture about wildlife, things like that. So there are programs for kids. So that's one of the things that you can add value rather than discount in this situation for the local market. Then we have another little interesting segment. As you know, Sri Lanka has a lot of people, workers in the Middle East who have been working. We have, I think, about 50,000 workers, and most of them have lost their jobs and they have wanted to come back. So now the government has to bring them back, and although the airport technically is not open for travel, we have repatriation flights coming in, and these people who come, and plus other visitors, Sri Lankans who have gone abroad, especially to Australia, there's a large contingent there who have parents who have gone to see their children, who are coming back, have to be quarantined. So the government felt that they could help the hotels. So they have taken right now about 35 hotels, amounting to about 3,500 rooms, as quarantine hotels. The army moves in and takes over the hotel, and then there's a staff a team. So that's an interesting segment that we are using 35 or 34 of our hotels right now as quarantine hotels. There's a standard flat rate of about $75 to $80 full board for two people, which is something. And the meals are all given at the door. No one comes out. So the cost element of that type of operation is very controllable, and so it's very profitable for most of these hotels. So that's another interesting thing which I think doesn't happen in other countries. Then in the meantime, like Tayub said, we also started planning, and we also started looking around to get a proper certification for our hotels as COVID safe hotels, safe and hotels. And we modeled it across along the lines of the Singapore model. And the tourism authority published guidelines, a very, very comprehensive guidelines, mapping a tourist from the time he arrives at the airport right to the time of departure, all the safety guidelines for each touch point. And the biggest part, of course, is the hotel, where the accommodation, how you manage the protocols. The government decided to suspend, when tourism opens, to suspend visas on arrival. So you have to apply online, and when you apply for that visa, you have to check on that website what are the hotels that have been approved. So right now, KPNMG is doing the audits of these guidelines, protocols, and about 20 odd hotels, I think, have been passed, and we are waiting Ministry of Health approval to give them the safe and secure certification. So these will go online, and so when a guest wants to come to Sri Lanka, when tourism opens, he will have to look at that and choose from only those hotels who have been approved, and he will have to check, and then he has to download an application onto his phone, which will then share his information when he comes to the Sri Lanka, how he's moving around, whether he has gone out from a registered hotel. So there are restrictions. So that application is also ready. So we were all ready to open up in August, just after my friends at Maldives did. But however, there were concerns about the second waves from, as Taib said, about the second waves in the source countries. So the government decided not to take a risk, because at that time, we did not have any foreign no community spread, and it was only coming from outside. So right now that is in suspension. We also are considering long stay visitors, like Maldives. Perhaps we don't have the comfort of the geographic spread, but we were looking at getting long stay people, so that then you can look at a certain group of hotels where they can quarantine. So your part of your quarantine is part of your holiday itself. You start, so you can walk around the hotel, but you can't go out of the hotel. And then again, like someone mentioned, we are looking at the wellness part. Sri Lanka is a salubrious country, good tropical atmosphere, so you can come here and relax and enjoy that. So we are looking at that segment, and to move out, so that people with a long stay, because Sri Lanka, the average stay was only 10 to 11 days. We were looking at 6 to 8 weeks travelers. So that was how it was going down. But however, now things are again in abeyance. I don't know what will happen in the next few days. But however, as in the case of Maldives, we are getting ready. We are certifying the hotels. We are doing training, and the hotels are following these protocols to a great extent, even with the Sri Lankan tourists. I was recently at a hotel, and I went to the restaurant, and they said, "Sir, you don't have your mask. Please wear your mask and come." Right? So things like that, and they take the temperature. So there are good practices which you are already learning. So I think there is possibility of opening up with countries, these travel bubbles and things like that we're talking about. But of course, all these have to be carefully evaluated, because this COVID situation is in great flux. 2 days ago, Sri Lanka was absolutely safe. Today, we are waiting to see the results, whether there is community spread or whether this is a specific cluster in a garment factory. So this is the situation. So I feel in the long run, as we said, customer service we have been talking about in the industry, wow factor, all that will take a second, will be important. However, more important will be the trust, the confidence the hotel and the tourism sector portrays. Flexibility in booking must come in, innovations, add value, and create that wellness, comfort level, health. And of course, it's an important situation to look at sustainability once again, because this is a good wake-up call, a good pause to look at how to get tourism onto a more sustainable, more balanced situation. As you know, we were talking about mass tourism. Sri Lanka also was a little bit into the mass market. So we've got to look at all these things. So important to look at the trust, the confidence the guest has that he's coming to a place where he's going to be looked after. He knows there are good protocols in place. He will be allowed flexibility if he has to cancel the booking, if he has to change the booking. There will be no cancellation fees. He will he will see a lot of new innovations where you can have buffets and barbecues outside in a open area rather than in a closed area, which gives you a bit more comfort. So those are the things which I feel we all must be looking at from an operational point of view. So I think that's the overall picture. It is very difficult to predict. So as was mentioned, what we can do is strategize, plan, look at what is going on in the other parts of the world and get ready. So Sri Lanka is doing that, but we will be very, very careful because the government is quite worried about any community spread, and being an island, a small island with a fairly high dense population, we don't want to get into that situation where the health authorities won't be able to handle a large outbreak. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mithipala. I take from your talk a lot of interesting ideas regarding innovative strategies, such as the idea of using the hotels and supporting them by bringing in, expatriates or people who are stuck abroad. And even the issue of the entire value chain, understanding the whole range, touch points, and how to embed safety protocols and better practices, streamlining all through the value chain. So there are some very important points. I see that as of now, there are no questions posted in the chat box. Dr. Parel, are there any that, at least I don't see any here?
No, not yet. Yeah.
So what we could do is, while people perhaps, think of questions that they could pose, maybe we can have a second round. I could turn to Ms. Yankila Sherpa, because you had wanted to make a few more points and we were restricted by time. So maybe you might want to expand on some of your thoughts. Ms. Sherpa? Yes. Yeah. If you would like, and also respond to some of the points made by the panelists, and any thoughts here.
One of the strategies that we are trying to take, especially in the adventure tourism sector, is intense training to all our guides and service providers, because in this new situation of tourism, in this new normal, on all the health guidelines and the health protocols. And another important part is what has happened is our mountains are still safe because of the proximity and because of the geographical remoteness of our mountain areas, which are the destinations for tourism in Nepal, the Himalayas. And because of land connectivity with mountain areas, we are trying to look at new areas, new destination areas, which are easily which can be connected by land. I'm talking about Nepal, okay? Which can be, people are now, like for example, the expats in Kathmandu would like to take their own vehicle and drive to a destination and enjoy the mountains. And that way they feel safe. Another important thing is disseminating information to all our source markets about the COVID situation of the country, especially the areas of which are the destination areas. So these are some of the things that I had to mention. And as Maldives and Sri Lanka, I think, did mention about, we also do have this, we are also lobbying for the survival of the small and medium enterprises with moratorium on interest, loan restructuring, tax cuts, as well as subsidies and relief packages as financial initiatives that can be carried out by the government. Well, the government has been talking about it, but it has not been implemented. So all our tourism organizations and associations are lobbying together for this. So these are some of the points that I have to mention. And I again would like to reiterate the importance of our regional cooperation in tourism at this point. I think we've been talking about regional cooperation in those SAARC forums and political forums. Now regional cooperation in economy, because our economy has suffered due to lack of tourism. In all the countries and the speakers present here, we have tourism as one of our main sectors of economy. So I think our cooperation, as I mentioned before, would be a vital thing. Again, as I think Sri Lanka, you talked about the proximity of the flight, because now we cannot think about somebody coming on a flight 17 or to 20 hours from America. We can rather talk about somebody coming from Thailand or Sri Lanka to Nepal. So we have to look at destinations which are more, which are closer to us, which would be our South Asian neighboring countries. So this is what I have to talk about. And as Sri Lanka's point was very much similar to Nepal's situation, we had the repatriation flights for people working in the Gulf and many other countries. We have a huge population of Nepalese working in the Gulf, in Korea, in South Korea, in the Gulf, in Malaysia. So the repatriated Nepalese people were also put in hotels, but many of them are not financially not in such a good situation. So only those people who could afford, they stayed in hotels, and the others, the government made provision for quarantines. But now we are having a little problem with our quarantine infrastructure in our country. We are lacking space. Kathmandu is a very densely populated. It is the center hub of everybody. We have only one international airport. So everybody enters, everyone who has to enter Nepal has to enter through Kathmandu. And our major problem has been our big population of migrant workers in India, and we have a very big border, open border with India, and a lot of our migrants brought the COVID-19. Otherwise, India used to be our big source market for tourism. So right now, flights to India have stopped. We have not opened flights. We have opened flights to the Middle East, and we are getting people. Tourism has not started at all, but today there was an announcement from the government saying that from October the 17th, international flights would resume full swing for tourism. So again, this is a big, lot of preparation and work that the government has to do regarding safety from the airport, the airlines and the airports, and how they are going to be quarantined. They're also talking about not having to quarantine. So we are really not sure about how the government, the government and the private sector is looking for tourism. We are really wanting tourism to be here, but we also have to know how to handle it. Mm-hmm. We do not want tourism and have a very bad, this situation is a very unique situation. It's not like we went through the earthquake. The big earthquake in 2015, we recovered very quickly, and it was something that was only for Nepal. But this pandemic is a global pandemic. So we don't know how we're going to handle this. But again, as our speakers have talked about the resilience, the tsunami affected us with the Southeast Asian tourist markets. But we were resilient and we recovered very fast. Now with this pandemic, I think we South Asians have to sit together, and such webinars and virtual meetings with sharing of ideas would be very helpful. I think I'm really learning a lot from our gentlemen from the other countries, Sri Lanka, Bhutan, Maldives, how we can go forward and carry on tourism in our respective countries.
Thank you very much. So we have some questions trickling in. The first question I have is from Damcho Rinzin. I wanted to know the general feeling of when tourism would become normal, or what happens if the coronavirus pandemic continues like this for a few good years? The question being asked by tourism partners is, when will tourism start to become normal? And this is one of the most difficult questions. So would appreciate getting some comment on this by panelists. So this is one, whoever would like to answer. And the other question, let me take two questions at a time, is that considering that tourism is the worst hit sector, could speakers shed light on social protection mechanisms for, say, porters or tourist guides? So the floor is open to whoever wants to answer.
Professor, I would like to add something on that.
Yes.
When will tourism start to become normal? And this is one of the most difficult questions. Of course, nobody knows. This is a natural pandemic. We have the thing here we are learning, everybody is learning, is either we get a vaccine or a good medicine. So we still don't know when these will come in. So with that, I think what we are doing, I can only say about Maldives, what we are doing is we are trying to live with it with very strict guidelines and very much listening to the health authorities. The government of Maldives, from the beginning of March, the president had a COVID task force, and His Excellency listens to the Health Protection Agency and what they propose us. So what we devised, the guideline, everything, and now how we are carrying out the tourism now. I mean, after opening the borders, we have received until a few days back, 22,900, which is okay. Of course, it's a fraction of what we receive, but what we are saying is it's not normal still. Of course, we have to live with it with very strict guidelines, very much monitored, and everything has to be looked into. I don't think there will anybody knows when this will be normal. The main point is trying to live with it. What if something happens? Who is going to take care of that? Isolation, quarantining, taking care of them. And but we have actually, yesterday we have introduced an insurance policy, for instance. It's a very low-cost insurance policy where each traveler could be covered. It's not mandatory, but if anybody, when they're traveling within Maldives, get positive or anything related to COVID-19, they will be taken care of. And it's very, very affordable a cost which we have introduced. And I think it's time the nations, the destinations, has to introduce different types of incentives for the tourisms. For instance, we started last month world's first border miles program, which makes headlines. We have to make headlines, I think. And of course, it's very difficult at this time of to make headlines, but still, I think things like that world's first border miles program, it's like a frequent flyer type of program where they will be getting different types of points for crossing the border to Maldives, things like that. And we have received the safety certificate. Belana International Airport has received its safety certificate. I think it's the second in the Southeast Asia. And I mean, we have to do with things that relates to COVID-19. Sorry, I will shorten it.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. What about on the question on social protection mechanisms for people who are engaged in various parts of the tourism sector? Would somebody like to take that question? What is being done? What could be done to alleviate the problems of the large informal section?
I will tell you what's happening in Sri Lanka. When you said social, I presume it is the individually employed people, right?
Yes, more of the informal sector, self-employed. Yes, yes.
who can't access these type of loans and stuff like
Yes,
that.
yes.
So I think tourism has taken a very bold step in actually giving a cash handout to the tourist guides and the chauffeur drivers. For the first time in history, there has been a little bit of a concern whether that is necessary, but at least something, one-off thing over the counter to all registered drivers to tide over the difficulty. But however, uh, I have been doing some programs out in the regions. The SME sector is really struggling, and they can't reach out to get these loans and these moratoriums because they don't have the collateral and stuff like that, right? So I think there needs to be a different sort of a fund or something with minimal, to take a risk, like some of those, short, small term, specialized aid support systems, which I think we have not really, but we have just given a one-off handout to most of the guides and the chauffeurs. But in the long term, as everyone is saying, this is going to last for a long time. So we need something that is sustainable and not just a one-off thing. But it's going to be difficult.
So to follow up on that question, thank you very much. I think this is being debated in a lot of the countries regarding the benefits of having direct benefit transfers and cash handouts and pumping demand, alleviating the problems of SMEs. Do you think this is a good time to try and address some of the informality that exists in the employment market in these countries? Because one of the problems of getting social protection or social safety nets out to them is because so many people are basically just casual informal workers. They're not recognized in the system.
Exactly. I can tell you that in Sri Lanka, like all in our region, the informal sector is huge, right? The unregistered. So up to now, although the tourist board reached out and asked them to register with them, they did not. But now, obviously, because it has hit them, there is. I was told by the chairperson of tourism that they had, for the whole year last year, they had 300 applications, and for this year they have 900 applications. So everyone wants to get in now.
Yeah.
So because of the demand, they have short-tracked the thing and said, we'll give you a 6 months pending, sort of a short-term approval, so that they can take this and then go to the lending institutions, because they want some registration. So as you said, yes, there's a good chance to bring these people into the fold, in a very strategic manner, not to be like go with the stick, but say open hand and say, okay, come in, we'll help you, we'll give you some training.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't know how to manage their cash, right?
Yeah.
I have done some programs and they don't know cash management at all. It's just hand to mouth. So you tell them, can you put up a sinking fund, keep something for a rainy day, how do you manage this?
Yeah.
What is your income? What is your proposed? So I think by doing some free programs like that, to make them feel that by joining the formal sector, that they get some advantage. Otherwise they feel, okay, you want to join and we will tax us. That's what they say.
Yeah.
They say, that's what's happening in Sri Lanka.
Yeah, I think that's one of the, I mean, if you look at every crisis also creates opportunities. It's a very good opportunity in aspects like this, as well as digitalization, pushing infrastructure, so many other things, and one should use this period for that. So thank you for your thoughts on that. There are some questions regarding domestic tourism, because everyone has mentioned that this would probably be the first part to revive. Already we are seeing in some of the larger markets there is scope for domestic tourism. But the question here is, what can Maldives do? Because Maldives, is there any scope for domestic tourism there? I guess the same could be said to some extent of Bhutan. So what do the smaller countries, which don't have as large a domestic market, do in this situation? So that's one question.
Rupa, I think it's not a matter of small or big. I think geographically how we are scattered, with our strong measures are that we cannot, even the locals cannot move from one island to other island just to contain the cases. So even for tourists, if they're coming for a resort, they are not allowed to go to another resort just to minimize contacts and any other risks involved. And there is a thing called split stay, where the tourists, if they are staying for a long time, they can apply, and with certain guidelines, they can be moved to another resort. Of course, there's so many things, permits to be taken from the local health protection agency. And about the locals moving from the one island to other island. Of course, I also would like to go to an island. I really want to get out to some place. But the thing is, the cases are in the capital. So it's not very good to move to another island, So that is the thing. Of course, we have an advantage of being isolated in islands, but at the same time, we cannot move like, definitely Sri Lanka has a very good advantage, because they can move around to uphill, and there's so many things they can do. And it's one factor, actually, the tourists are not moving from long haul destinations as well. Even China and the UK, EU, I think it's not only the COVID cases they are making green channel or safe tourism in other destinations. I think the main reason for them is so that the tourists will travel first within EU, within China, within Italy, and the economy will be moving around within first. For the first time in 30 years, I read in an article, China had the most, I think 80% hotels are fully booked. So it never happened in China, it seems. So things like that is also there. It's not only a matter of people not wanting to travel. People wants to travel. People really dream about traveling. People want to get out of their countries. But what we have to respect is the government's decisions.
Sure. Okay. Mr. Dradul, you have been quiet for some time, so would you like to comment on some of the issues that have been raised thus far? On the questions regarding the social protection, the domestic market and tourism, and when you see normalcy, if you have any things you would like to share.
Okay, on domestic tourism, what I'm trying to say is, while it can bring some economy back, but then if you are really going for the economic returns, then it is not going to be very significant, especially in Bhutan's case. But still, then we want to promote this, develop this. But to really have a meaningful impact from the tourism, it has to be an inbound tourism. Then coming on to the social protection, like if I give an example of Bhutan, it is as of now interim because of the COVID. And in fact, whatever we have done by our His Majesty the King, under his guidance and directives and the royal government, I think whatever we have done to those people who have been affected, who have been laid off because of the COVID-19, is really exemplary, actually. We feel that maybe it has not been done anywhere else in the world. Like to the all those people who have been laid off, who've been gone jobless, have been all actually compensated by the government. They have been paid basic minimum cash to sustain their livelihood. And then all other financial and the monetary measures, which I think some of the countries have also highlighted, that has been also fully implemented. In fact, ours seems to be much more bigger and longer. For instance, the loan repayment have been deferred for almost more than a year now. I think it's going to be 1.5 years. And then all the interest rates have been waived off. So these are all in place, but these are something that is maybe in the interim, but may not be for the long term. But my main interest here would be to hear from the other panelists, which was also brought by Yankila, on the regional cooperation. Can we do something meaningful in the regional? Just now, I think most of us are talking about our own countries.
National strategies.
So how, because we are talking about South Asia here, maybe as I said earlier, taking cue from Amyankula's information, our inbound tourism in the South Asia is just 12 million, whereas outbound is around 30 million. So there's a huge gap there. So can we do something there? And I feel definitely we can do something there. But the question is when. Yes. So this is something actually I wanted to hear from other panelists.
Yes, I actually wanted to come last to the question. I was hoping some of the participants will raise some questions on regional cooperation, but would any of the panelists, because we've been talking about these various platforms and these regional dialogues and so on, but nothing seems to really move. And there are political issues amongst the countries. There are still the lingering connectivity issues, infrastructural issues, visa issues, etc. So do you think COVID will really provide that momentum to kind of get over some of these hurdles? Will countries start seeing more eye to eye and seeing that there is a common sort of goal here and we can help each other? Do you see that? Or it will be again back to normal, saying a lot of things but nothing materializing? Any one of the panelists, please.
Well, I'll just make a comment. Sri Lanka, India is, I think, before the crisis, India was the second largest market to inbound. China was one. Just 5 years ago, India was nowhere there, right? It was only UK, France, Germany. So there is a huge shift, I know. And of course, Maldives and Sri Lanka have a lot of good connectivity, and we are very close. And obviously, there's a lot of travel. Maldivians come over for the weekend and go back. But unfortunately, I don't think there's been much traffic from other areas in the region. It might be worthwhile to look at why that is. Is it connectivity? Is it price? Is it the product offering? As someone said, it might be a useful thing to start some sort of a forum outside what is available now, without too much of red tape, to try and look at what these areas are. I know I have traveled to Nepal. I love the place. I have gone to Bhutan, but but general tourism from those areas, at least to Sri Lanka, is very minimal. They're not in our radar. So we need to know why first. Do a sort of some sort of analysis and see. Maybe if we get together, we can look at something like that. Anyway, that's my thoughts.
Okay. Ms. Sherpa, I think you would like to say something.
Rupa,
yes, sure.
Not, yeah. I think as just now Srilal has just mentioned, I think we have got 6 months. Look, why do we talk about it now? No, I'm seriously. We could have there's so many different government organizations in all of our these neighboring countries: Bhutan, Nepal, Maldives, Sri Lanka, and each of us has something to play. It's not today we need. I will take an example: Civil Aviation Authority, Transport Authority. They could have started working from even from March, April, May. Start talking to the airlines. Which airlines can come in? What are the difficulties they faced during the last 2 years? Give them some incentives. Get them talk about charters. Everything. We wasted a lot of time. There's so many things we could have done. Revise our guidelines. Mostly our guidelines are so old, like the 30-40 years. Revise our operation guidelines, tourism hotel guidelines. These things, though, what did we do? We could have done so much during this time. Each one has a responsibility to play. We got some. That's why we say, I'm not taking this as a challenge. I'm taking this as an opportunity. We can move around. There's so many things we could do with tour operators. because they had so much of problems in the past. Let's get to that point and ask them what was the reason. Bring them, talk to them online with the minister. Now we have to get down. We cannot be like this and just be so proud of ourselves. We have to get down to a level and then start working. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else would like to comment? If I can just play the devil's advocate, some of the countries in the region are faced with such tremendous challenges that I think somewhere these issues of tourism being a priority, I mean, some of the bigger countries, I'm saying tourism, what needs to be done, to tap particular markets, safety protocols, all of that, but it's been more focused on what just to do immediately to avert the crisis, how to handle migrants, etc. I'm just taking the case of India. It's really much lower down on the ladder. And capacity is not there. Institutional capacity, just the bandwidth, the healthcare infrastructure. There's just so many fires to fight that, it becomes difficult to really put emphasis on where regional cooperation would be. And so I'm just saying that this is probably one of the reasons. But at the same time, we've been hearing about these regional platforms for ages. I have heard about this ADB's development of the Buddhist circuit and all this sort of things. So there is something beyond just the platforms and the talk shops. There is a mindset issue. There is a political, deep down lack of political will. There is, connectivity hasn't really improved among some of the major players. So if those basic bottlenecks are not going to be addressed, it's not going to happen. And I don't know if COVID is going to give enough of a push to start looking at the region as your main market, or at least to tide over this crisis till normalcy comes and inbound tourism from other areas resumes. I mean, this is my own thought on it. I just don't see the willpower within the region, frankly, or the capacity to handle so many things. There is a question here actually about, it's very specific. It's talking about the revival of souvenir shops, but I would take it more generally as, there are a whole range of retail and other businesses which get affected, which have been majorly affected by this crisis. So what could be done to revive them? I think this is more of a general question, I would say, but specifically, does anyone have any thoughts about how to revive the souvenir, I would say the crafts, handicrafts, and so on industry? And then there's another interesting question actually about balancing, which is saying that Maldives may be in a specific geographical sort of advantageous position because of its isolated islands, but how can other countries balance the control vis-a-vis opening up of the market? So basically, can they do it effectively? So anyone would like to address any of these two questions?
I think that Sri Lanka is trying to do that, because that's what I mentioned. We don't have that geographic advantage Maldives has, but if and when we open, we might look at a cluster of hotels in a particular region and say that is going to be the tourism area for that area, and they will be all certified, and guests can go there, and we can have a sort of it's virtually a quarantine center, but guests have the freedom to move around and have some food. And of course they must be long stay. So that way you might be able to create that environment, that closed environment. Of course you have to have very stringent protocols. Staff coming in, going out, all have to be checked. So there's a whole we've gone through that whole rigmarole, and as some
Okay. Oops. Hello. I think
vigilancy. So that's one of the things. The geographic spread is what is very advantageous for Maldives, and you might be able to create, like the lady from Nepal said, the mountain areas are very isolated. So maybe you can create, this is the whole idea, as someone said, we want tourism, but at the same time, we must not forget that we have to be safe.
Yeah, true. True.
Yeah.
Rupa, can I add something to what Srila said? Yes, as
we'll
much
have to wrap up in another 5 minutes. So brief
30 seconds.
Yes.
Yeah. No, what I'm saying is, in spite of the one island, one resort concept, that is for the tourist one island resorts, and liverboats, which is kind of smaller yachts. And we are opening guest houses on the 15th of July. Sorry, 15th of this month. And it will be similar to what other countries are expecting, because the guest houses are in the local islands. So where there will be more locals there as well. What we have done is we have issued another separate guideline saying that in that island, there should be at least 5 rooms for quarantine, for isolation. And then the island council has to agree for certain things, how the protocols, wearing masks, cleaning and everything. So I think it's the same, something that could be done even like, for instance, Dolphin Hotel in Negombo. That area is very much, I think there's not much happening in there. So probably they can just have a kind of a boundary in there, isn't it, Srila? So there are so many places like that.
Hotel. That was my former hotel.
Oh, right. Okay.
The first hotel to be go as a quarantine hotel, and they are doing very well anyway. So
yeah.
I was CEO there for 10 years.
Okay.
So I think we have covered quite a lot of ground, many ideas, a lot of innovative sort of strategies being adopted. Of course, where I think we still need to think a lot more and out of the box, not the same old stuff that we've been doing for the last 10, 15 years of SARC, is I think really think of innovative regional strategies. And I think it has to be spearheaded more perhaps from industry, which sees more of commonality of interest as opposed to maybe governments always, everyone looking and waiting for the governments to come together. So I think there is, given the range of stakeholders involved in the tourism sector and some large players and then a lot of SMEs, I would think that industry bodies in these countries, tour association operators and so on, perhaps that's the kind of platform we need to come together. And somebody in the region may have to spearhead that process. Maybe the countries which have more stake in tourism will have to push this agenda. So thank you very much for a lot of interesting ideas. What I take away from this in terms of common themes is the importance of adaptability, resilience, innovativeness, and preparedness all at the same time. There are some very important ideas that have come, which is the significance of wellness and safety, which will become even more important in future. And therefore, the whole segment of wellness tourism is something that many countries may want to leverage. The scope to digitalize and to bring in much more technology and modernization into the sector. The importance of bringing together a wide range of stakeholders and public-private sort of partnership in reviving the sector. The importance of skill building, infrastructure development, and using this crisis to actually identify some of the deficiencies in the system and working on those so that you're ready by the time normalcy comes. Identifying niche areas and your USPs and leveraging them to your best advantage, whether it's high value, low volume, your geostrategic advantages, whatever it is. So I think the sense of optimism actually that I got from this whole panel discussion was quite refreshing, because we are living at a time when everything looks very gloom and doom. But it's nice to see that at least despite being very badly hit, the sector is looking optimistically towards the future and a revival and working on strategies for that long haul. So thank you very much, each one of you, for excellent interventions. And thank you to Soti and all the participants for making this session very insightful. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. Namaskar.
Thank you all. Thank you, panelists, including the keynote speaker, for sharing your experiences. And thank you, Dr. Chanda, for moderating it really well and summarizing it really well. Indeed, a lot of lessons have been generated. And for the benefit of a wider audience, we'll continue to keep or place these discussions on our YouTube channel for the benefit of a wider audience. And let me thank you all, including the participants and the audience, on behalf of Soti, Nepal, and the co-organizers, Biruni Institute, Afghanistan, Center for Policy Dialogue, Bangladesh, Research and Information System for Developing Countries, India, Sustainable Development Policy Institute, Pakistan, and Institute of Policy Studies, Sri Lanka. And let me also take this opportunity to invite you all for the next edition of this webinar, next week, Tuesday, 13th of October. The focus will be on climate change. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Thank you, Mr.
Namaste.
Parash.
Namaste.
Bye-bye.